Welcome, O Ramadan.
Radio Sultanate of Oman 90.4 and the Sultan Qaboos Center for Islamic Culture presents Reaching Out Through Dialogue. Listen and get involved. It is a great experience for you personally. It would really create a balance on each and every one of us in this holy month of Ramadan.
Stand up.
Reaching Out Through Dialogue. Presented by Hatim Harif Al Abdussalam.
Charity.
Directed by Matloob Ayel Al Wahabi. Reaching Out Through Dialogue. A special in this holy month of Ramadan. Here on 90.4 FM. 90.4 FM.
For the pleasure of
Assalamu alaikum, dear listeners. Thank you for tuning in to our program Reaching Out Through Dialogue. Our topic today is ethics and management of public office. Please join me to welcome our distinguished guest, Mr. Ahmed Al-Mukhaini, a researcher in human rights. Assalamu alaikum, Ahmed. How are you?
I'm fine, alhamdulillah.
Thank you for being here with us today.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
You're most welcome. Okay, ethics in our modern day and time can stem from several sources. We shall be concerned today with ethics in Islam. Ethics and morality are often used interchangeably. Do you see a difference in them?
Yes. In my opinion, ethics is basically a set of rules, a set of what you call norms of practices, what is accepted, what is not accepted, what from the perspective of Islam would be halal or haram, what would be pleasing God or not pleasing God, what would be good or evil, and so forth. But morality is the actual process of being ethical. Morality is the process of decision making, whether something is ethical or non-ethical. This is my sense of the word and the way I have actually spoken to my students, how we actually react to them. And there is a process through which you examine ethics, you look at the rules and regulations that you have, depending on how you define yourself, depending on where you anchor yourself. So that process and that sense of duty, of thinking, sense of duty of morality, sense of contemplation is the actual morality that I would actually think of.
Okay. Now, what do you think the end objectives of ethics in our society? Or in other words, why do we need ethics? And do we need them?
Yes, we do. I mean, as I said, it's a normative thing. It's a set of norms of practice, what we actually accept. Particularly if we are to be in a society, as human beings are social beings. They cannot live on their own. They have to live in society. They decide what is an acceptable norm. Sometimes this norm will be drawn from divine sources, like the Quran or Sharia, for instance. Sometimes they will be drawn from customs, Araf. Sometimes they'll be drawn from the collective good, what has been agreed upon worldwide to be good or to be bad. So without them, you really live in chaos. It's almost, it's a precursor to law.
But wouldn't you think that there should be a standard so that everybody could follow?
Well, that's a law
for ethics.
Well,
so what would seem ethical to me in my country, maybe it would be offending in your country.
Well, this is a huge challenge and a huge difference, because ethics, to a great extent, rightly or wrongly, do actually depend on how you anchor yourself. Do you see yourself more of a Muslim than Arab, for instance? Or you see yourself more an Arab than a Muslim? And if you are in Europe, would you see yourself more as a European than a Muslim? And so the European norms of practice will take precedence in how you think and how you moralize and how you understand things or analyze them than how do you actually look at them as a Muslim. So there is, of course, a great movement now to move away from understandings that are based in theology, theology of Islam, Christianity, Judaism, and to look at the movement of global ethics. This movement is really trying to encourage people worldwide. It's led by a professor called Hans Kung. I think he's based in Germany. Is to lead people to look at things from a global perspective, from an ethical perspective, regardless of what religion you come from, what tradition you come from. But whether you accept that or not, you, at the end of the day, you would need to have ethics.
Okay.
You really need to have ethics because, it's in a way, from my analysis, it makes you a human. It really makes a distinction because ethics is related to intellect. And in Islam, I would delve into this maybe later, depending on the time and the context. But in Islam, ethics come to serve very important objectives or ends. And they can be summarized in 4.
Okay.
Ethics should lead to a sound mind, aql rashid. Ethics should lead to a peaceful soul, or I think the soul is a better translation, which in Arabic is nafsun mutma'inna, so it's tranquil soul.
Tranquility.
Tranquility. So, and then ethics should lead to the third end, which is strong personality. شخصية واثقة. You know how to handle circumstances that will come on your way. And fourthly, ethics should actually bring about a healthy body. جسد صحيح. So there are 4 ends envisaged in Islam for ethics.
Ahmed, the 4 elements that you mentioned are all related to ourselves and are not related to the other or to others around you, not yourself. I don't know how to put it in words, but I don't know if you got my point, because when you talk about your mind, your soul, your body, and your personality, you're talking about yourself. What about the people around you?
Well, if you look at it from that perspective, you have to remember that you, as a person, is a member of a society, of a community.
Okay.
So suppose you don't have aqlun sahih, suppose you don't have a sound mind, wouldn't the society be required to cater for you?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. In that case, you have impinged on the wealth, impinged on the responsibility, on the resources, whether it's human resources, psychological resources of the society. So by, in Arabic, we have a very important saying, ابدأ بنفسك فقومها. You start with yourself. The moment you rectify all your errors, you really focus on your own self, and you become a good agent of God, you become a good Muslim, the society would follow suit, because the society is mainly composed of people. And if each one of us really respects the ethics and look for these 4 ends to materialize in him or herself, the society, a good society, will become a de facto.
Okay. That made it clear. Thank you so much for clarifying. Now, could you elaborate on the guiding principles of morality?
Yeah. Well, if you look at morality as a decision making process, as I said, it leads us. It's based on the set of ethics which Islam perhaps has put in the concept of Sharia. Sharia is not a fixed thing. It's not set in stone.
Can you, before you continue, can you just elaborate to our listeners?
Sharia?
Yeah, what does Sharia mean?
Sharia means the way. Okay? Sharia means the way, and it's the way to guide us to the end that we desire, and that is to be righteous.
Okay.
So it's the way to righteousness, and it is not set in stone. It's very flexible. It's something which we are allowed to think about, and that's why jurisprudence was created.
Okay.
And so I'll cite the example of the objectives of Sharia as some of the examples used in as guiding principles in morality, which is the decision-making process vis-a-vis ethics. So, for example, in Sharia, we have 5 objectives,
Okay.
and they are set in priorities. The first one is preservation of the soul, حفظ الروح, preservation of the mind, second priority. Third priority or objective is preservation of the body, al-jasad. And then fourthly, the preservation of the community, or whether it's the larger community as ummah, or the genus of mankind, or it's just our own family. Plus, finally, preservation of wealth. So money or wealth comes the least important in this. So, for example,
I just wanted you, before you go further, if you can elaborate on the priority of the order.
Yeah.
How you put them into
I'll
order.
give an example to put it actually in context.
Okay.
So, for example, in Islam, drinking alcohol is not permitted.
Okay.
Okay. Why? One of the reasons mentioned in Islam is that drinking alcohol might intoxicate a person and would make him or her lose their mind, which will render them without an intellect, which will render them without will. And if you don't have intellect to reason things, you lose your will, you are no longer a full agent. So you cannot really function as a human being. You cannot be bound by law. You cannot be bound by ethics.
Okay.
However, Islam says, I'm willing to compromise intellect in order to preserve the soul. So if you are somewhere in the wilderness, and you have no water, and you're really going to die out of thirst, and you just come across a can of beer, okay?
Okay.
And so what do you say to yourself?
That would be interesting.
Okay. So do you actually drink the can of beer, or you say, no, I'm a good Muslim, I will just die, become a martyr for no reason? No. Islam says to you, you can drink from that can of beer sufficient amount to keep you alive. So don't take it as an opportunity to get drunk and take the whole
to start partying.
the whole can. No, just drink sufficiently to keep you
to
alive.
keep you alive. Okay.
So then Islam compromised the second priority of preservation of the mind in order to maintain the top priority,
Which is the soul.
preservation of the soul, to be alive. Okay, and that's why in the Sharia they are putting these 5 priorities: the soul first, mind second, body third, community fourth, and wealth comes fifth and last.
But if someone argues and says that mind and body is one, would you agree on that?
No.
And the priority that the mind is part of the body.
Well, mind here is not strictly the brain that you have. It actually encompasses other elements. That's why it says mind in Arabic, al-aql. And the aql is not dimag, it's not the brain, not the functional thing. It's the conscious that actually is within you. It's a set of senses that you have.
The common sense.
Common sense. It's an assemblage of senses, assemblage of concepts, assemblage of components that are not strictly part of your body. So the body is basically the physical component, the vessel itself.
Okay.
You see?
Okay. There has been a debate about intent and acts. Which one precedes the other? Or do they have to be in any particular order?
It's a huge debate, actually, about intent and acts, because it really relies on the principles of ethics. And before I actually come into the discussion of the principle, the question of acts and intents, I think we need to examine the components of ethics in Islam.
Okay, we'll be right back after the break.
Welcome, O Ramadan.
You just heard Reaching Out Through Dialogue, a joint program of Radio Sultanate of Oman 90.4 and the Sultan Qaboos Center for Islamic Culture. Presented by Hatim Harif Al Abdusalam. Directed by Matlub Ayel Al Wahabi.
It is Ramadan. Welcome, O Ramadan.
Now back to the program, Reaching Out Through Dialogue, presented by Hatem Harif Al Abdussalam.
Welcome back, Ahmed.
Thank you.
Now let's go back to our point, assertion of ethics in Islam, which we'll discuss about the intents and acts.
Thank you. Yes, as I said earlier, I think in order for us to look at the debate between intents and acts, which one comes first, and do they have to be in any particular order, and the impact of that order, if there is an order, or the impact of that relationship on ethics and morality in Islam, it's important that we look at what are the most important elements or perhaps terms or concepts in ethics in Islam. Perhaps there are about 4 or 5 of them, if I just may proceed with them. The first one is the concept of ilzam, the concept of obligation.
Okay.
And in this concept of obligation is drawn from the fact that our end is yet to be, and our death will be a beginning, a new beginning.
Okay.
And this obligation is drawn from our relationship to God. It's a combination of our responsibilities and it's common responsibilities and individual abilities. So that's where obligation in Islam comes from. So it's very much related to God, and related to the second important concept, and that is the responsibility and mas'uliyya wa taklif in Islam. And God has given this responsibility to make decisions, responsibility to look after the earth and to look after each other, because we are intellectual beings.
Okay.
We are intellectual beings, and we have the faculties that enable us to make decisions, to think. Okay? And so there is a duty of thinking, and there is the ability to think. It will be unjust, God forbid, of God to give us the responsibility to think without giving us the ability to think. So He gave us both.
Okay.
The ability to think and the responsibility to think, in morality, to think about morality, to rely on ethics. But God also, because He has made us, and if you use a washing machine, the example I usually use here, you would always tend to go and read this. I mean, I do. I don't know about others. I would go to the instructions manual and read how to operate this washing machine or this microwave, and I would understand the limits of the item that I'm dealing with. I would listen to the manufacturer. So as a Muslim, I believe I have been manufactured by God. So God is my manufacturer. So He has given me a manual.
A set of instructions.
Exactly. How to handle human beings, how to handle myself, okay? And what are the limits, and how I understand these limits, and how I explore these limits, okay? So there is a duty upon me, okay, to understand it. So in this manual, which is in our case the Quran, and the set of knowledge actually associated with it as well, okay, God did not leave us only with the responsibility of thinking and the ability of thinking. He does understand that people as human beings have, something within them that actually might lead them astray. People do not always resort to rationale. Sometimes their pulse, their instincts lead them. So in order to regulate these instincts, God instituted rewards and retribution, al-thawab wal-iqab.
Okay.
So intellect serves some people, rewards and retribution serve others. And these are essential components
To
in
keep you on the
ethics,
right track.
To keep you on the right track, to keep you mindful of what is there and what you need to be there.
Okay.
So, and with that, here comes your most favorite subject, intent.
Intent.
Yes, so
Okay.
an-niyya wa dawafa, intentions and motivations.
I always confuse which comes first, intent or
Or the act.
the act.
Well, in Islam, there are two components, intentions with motivation, and then we have al-juhd wal-amal, the effort. Okay.
Okay, would you give
Yes. I will
examples of
give you
each one of them
examples
so
on
that it becomes clear to our listeners?
God asks us to have His love and His pleasure to be the main driving motivation beyond our intents.
Okay.
So our motivation is God's pleasure and God's love. And based on this motivation, we create our intentions to actually, break a glass or give you water or do something, okay? And then, based on the ability of each one of us, we exert an effort. So this effort is really conditioned by our ability. So you can stand, a very cold studio. I cannot stand a very cold studio, for instance.
Like this one?
Like this one, yeah, okay? So, you will be rewarded according to your abilities and whether you have exerted effort to exhaust these abilities. But if you did not exhaust these abilities, your treatment will be different. But if I have exhausted all my abilities, I really was persevering and was patient, I didn't say a word, I was quiet and did everything, then I'll be rewarded differently, okay? Because I did exert all the efforts, I exhausted all my abilities.
Okay.
And in this sense, the debate existed. Do you do things because it's supposed to be done or because you want to do them? All right? In an ideal world, you would do them because you wanted them. You do them because God wanted you to do them. You do them because you think that's God's pleasure and love. You do them because you feel that it makes you, if I may say so, perfect, between inverted commas, agent of God on earth. So you do good because you think it's the right thing to be done, not because there's a policeman behind you or there's your boss watching over your shoulder.
Okay.
Okay? But in Islam, it says, you have to encourage people to make the intent. Because, for instance, if you come to work every day at 7:30 and you leave at 2:30 or 3 o'clock, depending wherever you work, it becomes a habit. And Aristotle said quality is a matter of habit. So it becomes a habit. This habit engenders a sense of intention within you, a sense of pleasure within you, a sense of desire to do something good. And that's why, for instance, even if somebody doesn't like to say his prayers, my child, for instance, I'm sure when I ask my children to go and say their prayers, they curse me day and night. But I'm trying to get them to
do the act, and then the
Exactly.
intention will come.
The intention will come because they will get a sense of sensation, a sense of pleasure out of doing something. And then if they don't do it, if they miss it once, they would know what they have missed. And then they would go back to it and do it more and more and more. But that is a real situation. In an ideal situation, I would like them to say their prayers, to give their alms, mainly because they believe it's the right thing to be done.
But now you're talking about two ways, two streams. So is there a right stream and a wrong stream, or is it two different ways that you can choose which one to take?
You see, in ethics, when I teach ethics, I usually say to my students two things. First, there is nothing in ethics as clear wrong or clear right. It's very much depending on the individual and circumstances, because God created us differently, individually, and our circumstances vary. Your work circumstances differ from me. And the second thing, I teach my students and I ask them if they remember this, they have learned ethics in its fullest. The biggest challenge to ethics is your ego, is yourself. The moment you overcome yourself, you overcome your own needs and instincts, you have mastered ethics. Very simply.
I just wanted us to discuss about the example you told me yesterday regarding someone coming and giving you information.
Yes.
Would you elaborate more?
Yeah, I mean, this is just an example. There are various examples that one actually come across. It's, that's where applied ethics come in place.
Okay.
is when you believe in something to be done, but then, for instance, the example we cited, a colleague of yours is committing a grave error, a mistake in the workplace.
Okay.
And everybody know about it, but nobody's going to say anything about it. Okay? And then one person comes and whispers in your ears. This person is not willing to inform you officially, not in writing, and he says, I'll just leave it to you, then you can make a decision on it.
Okay. But you didn't know about it.
You didn't know about it. And officially, according to the principles of your law and your regulation at work, you cannot take any action against that employee unless you know about it officially. His boss has complained about it. The person who has been erred against has complained about it. You cannot just come out of the blue and say, hey, Mr. X, you made a mistake. There should be some evidence. Okay?
Okay.
So, your ethics says to you something. You are in a very difficult situation. Should you act according to what you know, or should you act according to what you think should be done? Okay? What should be done is somebody has to put a complaint in writing and start up a process. But what you know is different. Okay? Then, in Arabic, we have this what we call tazahum. You have two evil or complications that actually might come to you.
One is severe and one is
one less severe. One
less
is
severe.
more severe, one is less severe. Then you have to think about it. And you see which one of them would be the most damaging. Okay? Or which one of them would be the least damaging. And both of them are bad. Both of them would be damaging.
Catastrophic.
Yeah, perhaps. So you have to think which is the least damaging in your judgment.
We'll come back to this after the break.
Welcome, O Ramadan.
You just heard Reaching Out Through Dialogue, a joint program of Radio Sultanate of Oman 90.4 and the Sultan Qaboos Center for Islamic Culture. Presented by Hatim Harif Al Abdusalam. Directed by Matlub Ayal Al Wahabi.
It is Ramadan. Oh, Ramadan.
Now back to the program Reaching Out Through Dialogue. Presented by Hatim Harif Al Abdusalam.
Quran.
Welcome back, Ahmed.
Thank you.
Let us go back to the example that we said
Yeah.
before the break.
Let's take a precise example. I mean, for instance, somebody who's committing sexual harassment to one of his colleagues, and the lady who's being sexually harassed is not willing to come forward because she's concerned about stigma. She's concerned about how he would react to this situation and so forth. So she prefers to continue in suffering, and everybody knows about this. But then one guy, a colleague of theirs, comes and informs you that something of this sort is going on. You could have three ways of handling this. You either do nothing,
And just ignore it.
ignore everything that's going on, and then you would have people lose confidence in the organization, lose confidence in you. People think that this organization is not safe, has no ethics, no value.
Plus, the lady would continue
of course,
suffering.
and people will continue suffering. The lady will continue suffering. The second thing is you could take an action, discipline that person, okay? But your action will be illegal, because in order for you to take a proper formal action, you need to have something in writing.
A proof.
A proof, exactly. Or the person who has been erred against would come to you and say to you, I have been sexually harassed. You cannot rely on a third party. So what do? So maybe you just think, I'm not going to approach that thing. The third option is you take a midway situation or position,
Which
and
is?
you go and talk to the guy. But even talking to that guy, you are actually risk two things, or you can have either of two ends to it. The guy might actually be very courteous and say, yes, I'm sorry, I have committed a mistake, I admit it, and I will not repeat it. And then, he would honor the fact that you have approached him as a colleague and one-to-one. Or
It would
he
be
would-
defensive.
he will be very defensive, he will deny it, and in his denial, he would actually go and cause more damage to the lady,
Threatening her, let's
threatening
say.
her,
Yeah.
or the other people who are talking about him. Or he would say, oh, now the moment you brought it up and to me, it means it has become public knowledge. So then he would speak about it in every
He might sue you
avenue.
for reputation. Mm.
Exactly. So it's a very difficult situation. You need to really weigh out the challenges and the damages, okay? And if I were in your shoes, I would actually take an action, okay? Start, initiate an illegal action.
But and then we'll go back to point A, that what would be considered an ethical act from
Yes.
your side? What would you do?
Well,
The first option, second option, or third option?
so in that case, that's where you actually either have personal set of ethics, something which you
Believe in.
as your guiding ethics. Or you would say, no, I would go by the profession I belong to. Or you would say, I would go by the organization I work with. And here I remember a very small story, short story I would say, by a doctor called Hunayn ibn Ishaq, a very famous doctor during the Abbasid Empire. Al-Ma'mun, Hunayn learned his medicine in Greece, and he was good friends with the king of Rome. And Al-Ma'mun loved him, but he thought he might actually be against
Just
him.
elaborate who's Al-Ma'mun.
Al-Ma'mun is one of the Abbasid caliphs, and this guy, Al-Ma'mun, he was really a promoter of knowledge and learning and translation,
Okay.
and so forth. So he tried to persuade Hunayn to poison the king of Rome and gave him anything he wishes. He will give him his weight in gold, but if he says no, he will sever his head. And Hunayn refused. And then Hunayn was put in prison for 1 year. And after 1 year, Al-Ma'mun asked him,
Will you do it now?
Yeah, and then Al-Ma'mun and Hunayn said no. And then eventually Al-Ma'mun accepted Hunayn's position and said to him that he was merely testing Hunayn's allegiance and loyalty. And then he asked Hunayn, why did he reject? He said to him, I had two deterrents. I had God
Okay.
and how God would view my act, and I had my profession. I had to respect my profession. And in my profession, I swore an oath not to kill people, but to cure people. So you have to determine what are your ethics. Are they drawn personally? Are they drawn at the institutional level? Or are they drawn at the professional level? And then you can decide which set of those you would apply to the circumstance that we have just mentioned.
Now, do you have more examples of ethics in public office, or do you want us to carry on to the last point of the discussion?
I think, the last point that we have agreed upon, they are very much linked to each other. And that is ethics in the workplace, and as we have mentioned now.
Okay.
And in Islam, ethics in the workplace has really been symbolized in the concept of ra'iyya. And ra'iyya is it's like the ra'i, the shepherd. So a person is a shepherd in his own family, like the wife is a shepherdess in her own family and in her community.
And you're responsible for the flock.
Yeah, exactly. And then you are also a shepherd in your own work. So if you are responsible for a certain files, this is your flock. This is what you are responsible for. So in Islam, the sense of shepherd, or being a shepherd, is very much malleable, scalable rather than malleable. It's scalable. It applies to individuals. It applies to to communities. It applies to something of common wealth and something of individual wealth. And every person, the Prophet said, each one of you is a shepherd and is responsible for what he's been asked to cater for or care for. So that is very much extended into the workplace.
The workplace.
So you have responsibilities in the workplace. And it's interesting. I did a workshop once on ethics in the workplace, and I did ask people, why do we need ethics in the workplace?
That would be interesting.
Okay.
Tell us about that.
And I had actually 2 lists. Okay, I covered them, but I just listened to them. And people said, we need ethics, or they would adopt ethics, they would become ethical in their behavior, pardon me, at work, because they want to be distinguished. They want to be seen as special, as exceptional. They also cared about the organizational reputation. They also cared about confidence of their customers, whether the internal customers or the external customers. It's also for them, it impacted organization, impacted quality of work. So ethics for them was an important component of quality. It also, for them, meant making decisions, appropriate decisions and quick decisions, because there are ethics and they adopt or abide by these ethics. They also found in ethics, a safety net. It prevents them from coming into situation that they would regret later, or committing mistakes that they would actually regret later. It also, for them, ethics meant loyalty. Loyalty to the country, loyalty to the organization, loyalty to their fellow colleagues. And finally, they saw ethics as a legal responsibility. None of them mentioned ethics from the religious perspective. None of them looked at ethics as, seeking God's pleasure or seeking to be a good agent of God on earth, or trying to identify where halal and haram is. And for me, it was interesting. One can look at it in 2 ways. You would either believe that these people do not have a separation in their mindset between God and their life.
Do have.
They do not. They can actually, it can be interpreted that they do not see any separation, and hence they talk about it as, kind of a de facto thing, but they are with God, and so whatever they say is automatically blessed by God. Or one can interpret that people think that the workplace is a domain for not for religion. It's a domain for man-to-man relationship. Okay, so it was interesting for me to actually see that.
Ahmed, thank you so much for being here with us today. I'm sure our listeners enjoyed today's topic, and myself, I enjoyed as well. And we all benefited from the vast information you presented. Thank you, dear listeners, for tuning in. Enjoy your iftar and have a blessed evening. I'm your host, Hatem Al Absalam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.